I've already shared with you my experience of being a victim of black magic, but now come to realise there are a number of problems with its statement which reveal so much. You see, I've realised that our very language dominates our thoughts. Words have a magical quality, especially when written. The word victim implies victimhood, which is self-fulfilling and will sustain any magical attack. If you watch animals hunting prey in nature, it often seems that the prey is aware of their role and ultimately is resigned to their own demise. The same is observed in black magic attack, and the prey needs to change the narrative. Secondly, the definition of black and white magic is fluid and highly objective. Indeed, applying our definition of black magic on what others do could be seen as black magic in itself, and I will speak more on this later. Finally, in the non-dualist paradigm, there is no I, only the universe. So these are simply experiences of learning. Of course, I need to provide some rudimentary definitions, but these are simply those I'll work with. In no way am I imposing my view on you. So what is magic? Is it other people's religions? That which science is yet to discover. Using energies to create change. Using psychology to create change. All have a grain of truth in them, but even when combined feel inadequate. For example, maybe magic is what science will never discover, or at least not adequately. However, I do have a very psychological approach to most things. What are black and white magic? It's no easy definition. And as I say, they're highly fluid. Seemingly honest actions can result in negative consequences, and seemingly negative actions can result in positive consequences. For me, black magic involves selfishness, greed and control. But such a definition must surely include politicians, business people, educators, advertising executives. Is this tenable? Well, for me it is, but it's not for me to convince you, as this would fit my definition of black magic. It's easy to see it as a fight between good and evil, between God and the devil, and if that's your belief, that's your prerogative. But it really doesn't provide a working definition of black magic. Concepts of the fight between the God and the devil really come from the Abrahamic religions in the Middle Ages. But many magicians do not belong to Abrahamic religions, and those who do are unlikely to hold on to this concept. That's right, most magicians are not Satanists. That's right, most magicians are not Satanists. Some may call on external entities, or one of which may be called one of the names of the devil, but rarely does this come from the baggage of the Abrahamic religions. In this vlog I'll borrow a little from Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, but this has very little to do with what most people would describe as Satanism. Our religious zealots would claim that magicians are possessed by Satan and being tricked into not realising it. But again, this definition would fit my definition of black magic. There are a very limited number of people who do practice something closer to Satanism, as defined by religious zealots, but they are very few. Often these involve transgressive acts against one of the Abrahamic religions. But in order to reject the Abrahamic religions and believe in Satan, one has to have been a part of one of these religions. Indeed, these religions' description of Satanism seem to influence, maybe encourage, its very practice. But it is limited. There are many examples of Satanists who appear to be rejecting their strict religious upbringing. I should add that certainly Aleister Crowley seemed to be rejecting his strict Plymouth Brethren upbringing, but he really couldn't be called a Satanist. Perhaps I need to introduce the concept of high and low magic. Some simply mean the difference between ceremonial magic and folk magic in using these terms. But for most, high magic is about using the concept of magic to unite the self. Or for me, as a Muslim and a devout one, it's to become closer to Allah. Although I must emphasise, I do not engage in what most people would think of as magic, but Islamic mysticism. Shocking though this may seem to religious zealots, but most magicians are seeking to become closer to God and not using it for selfish reasons. Thus the condemnation by religious zealots actually seems designed to stop the religiously devout, like myself, from moving closer to God. So is there a fight between good and evil going on in the world? Well, maybe. I certainly engage in a daily jihad to understand what I should do and think. But from my experience as a victim of magic, I have learnt that concepts of good and evil aren't common. I now need to explain, at least a little, non-dualism. Concepts of good and evil, God and the devil, even heaven and hell, are dualist concepts. That is, that they are external from us. Now, many magicians do use a dualist concept, believing in external forces impacting on the world. You might like to call them demons, jinns, saints, even gods, or God. But for a non-dualist, we're all part of the universe. There's no individual, no others, only an interconnected universe. That's why I say there is no good nor evil, only experience. But as I say, that does not excuse selfishness, greed or control, although some may use it in this way. Non-dualism has a very strong tradition within Islam, and certainly was, or maybe still is, the dominant philosophy within Islam. Nevertheless, dualists cannot comprehend non-dualism, and often become aggressive when confronted with it. Nor can they accept metaphors and believe that their 21st century experience ideally suits them to interpret ancient scriptures literally, as though they were written for them alone. For non-dualists, a non-dualist Muslim, Allah the Creator is of the universe and thus sits above it. Yes, Allah is within us all, but we are not Him, although maybe co-creating with Him. Therefore, we may only strive to become closer to Allah and not unite with Him. So what is magic within non-dualism? Well, it's simply an experience. Probably a reflection of our own shadow and unconscious. A mirror, if you like, of our deepest and probably repressed feelings. The universe seeks balance. You might like to call this karma. And I do. But karma does not explain this well enough. It is simply balance, and that is why there is no good nor evil, only equilibrium. I have to say I'm dubious that this balance works in a mechanistic way, although the reaction is often the opposite of the action. Reaction is often the opposite of the action. But I don't really feel that we can talk of negative acts returning by a multiple of 2 or 4 or 10, nor within a specific timescale. However, this is simply my experience. What is this shadow which seems to be driving us? Well, it's young shadow, our deeply buried unconscious. It's not necessarily dark, although frequently is. It's an unconscious part of our personality that conflicts with our ego ideal. Thus we choose to bury it. The ego is not the self, but what we wish others to see. A mask, if you like, the Dr. Jekyll to our Mr. Hyde. But we can only become whole by acknowledging and uniting with our shadow. Only then can we begin to love ourselves. And for the religiously devout, then this is how we move closer to God. It is the suppression of our shadow which leads to our greatest fears, and from these, hatreds. It is the shadow which creates good and the evil as external forces. The shadow which assumes all magic to be devoted to acts of selfishness, greed and control. The shadow which claims magicians to be Satanists. Because all of these are deeply repressed within our unconscious. Why do we suppress such aspects of our personality? It's due to trauma. We've all suffered, and we all have. Often this trauma goes back to our earliest childhood, possibly rejection by parents that we're completely unaware of. With 20% of the population being psychopaths or narcissists, statistically 40% of us will have experienced abuse from one of our parents. Maybe an exaggeration, as the incidence of both parents being psychopaths or narcissists is higher than by purely chance. Although we must also experience a shock, although we may also experience a shock later in life, such as a personal tragedy, experience of traumatic events, etc. Our lives now seem to be constantly under stress. With so many demands on our time and thinking, especially at work, again, at very least 20% of us work for psychopathic or narcissistic managers. Although this certainly is an underestimation, and the true figure could be as high as 80%. As these are the very people who seem to get promoted to positions of authority. No wonder we've become addicted to the ephemeral on our mobile phones. So many of us have become traumatised during the health crisis that I cannot help feeling that was exactly the purpose of the official response to it. Look at how triggered and angry people have become the world over. And that's exactly what I speak of. How we've become divided into readily predictable tribes and increasingly driven by lost causes. Given the predominance of psychopaths and narcissists in position of powers, is it any wonder that the modern world feels so hostile towards humanity itself? This is the theory of pathocracy. Maybe you don't buy it, but simply see it as complete dominance of the left brain thinking over the right. Recent evidence shows this to be a little oversimplified, but it remains that the left brain is logical and mechanistic, whereas the right is more holistic and seeing concepts, sometimes erroneously. When confronted with danger, there is a natural fight or flight response. We no longer think rationality as a part of our brain shuts down. Rationally as a part of our brain shuts down. But even this appears to work when we sense danger that our physical senses cannot perceive, even over long distance. Now this is magic, but without wanting to seem like I am using pseudoscience, is pointed to by quantum entanglement. But here's the important twist: the addiction to the ephemeral. Our loss of our shadow and being driven by fear make us prone to control by others, including black magicians. And again, that is my very point. Governments and businesses may not call this magic, but behavioural marketing and behavioural programming. But the concepts are the same. You might say identical. Let us return to the popular, yet erroneous image of the black magician, of somebody sending evil and harm to others for their own pleasure, taking the wealth, health and bodies of others just because they desire them. Certainly many are initially attracted to black magic, do exactly this, seek retribution for what they see as injustices against them, maybe based on this increasing tribalism. For me, it's not important how they attempt to achieve this. Some may call on demons, even Satan. Others may engage in complex ceremonies, having the appearance of someone else's religion, even wearing lion skin belts. Again, maybe 40% of black magicians are psychopaths or narcissists, although few will continue on this trajectory. Again, I will talk about this later. They're only able to control others by tapping into our fear and shadow. And because we've not reunited with our shadow, their magic will get the flight or fight response from us. I've mentioned many times that I've learned to deal with black magic attack through not responding, i.e. not going into flight or fight mode, to understand and forgive my aggressor. And this is the very reason why, after all, I'm only fighting my own shadow. The religiously devout will tell you that they cannot be affected by black magic because of their faith, or because of their prayers, holy water, talisman, etc. Scientists may say the same, simply because they don't believe in magic. Both have very valid points. But it's simply that they're less likely to be controlled by others because of their firm beliefs. And I have seen such people being the most affected by magic once it manages to break through. Because once their resistance is breached, they have no further defence and are not adaptable to deal with the situation. Indeed, many of the religiously devout and materialist scientists are likely to put up such strong barriers between their ego ideal and their shadow that ultimately they're the most susceptible to magic. Not only is it these barriers that black magicians exploit, but many believe they receive power back from them because the energy of the resistance and final breakthrough is so strong. So is it our ability to unite with our own shadow and love ourselves which seems to provide the barriers we need as defence to black magic? I cannot be sure of this, but my experience seems to suggest it to be exactly the case, and certainly a good many black magicians believe this. Indeed, so many times when I've talked about being a victim of black magic, those who understood told me that I will come to see this as a blessing. I never really appreciated why, but felt there was something very profound in this. Well, it has challenged me to confront my own shadow and love myself once more. In fact, my experience of magic has led me to my own power and confidence. So what happens when black magic fails to reach its target? Well, black magicians will tell you that it returns back to them. This is the karma that so many speak of. Certainly I've seen this happening But somehow it's nothing like as mechanistic as many would expect. Black magicians will always tell you that as their magic attacks the victim's separation between their ego image and the shadow, then even when not returning, theirs will be a psychological impact on their own separation. But if it fails, its spell fails, the impact is so much stronger. That is why black magicians rarely keep trying to use magic for purely selfish purposes. However, a good many use magic as a means of reuniting with their own self. Thus, what we might see as negative consequences are actually embraced by them, even to get close to the god should they have religious beliefs. Another reason why there is no good and evil, and why distinctions between white and black magic are somewhat blurred. Maybe I should pause for a while and let that sink in, as I'm about to get deeper. Within Islamic magic, there's a very strong belief that the magician is only able to send magic if they're pure, even a devout Muslim. A great emphasis is placed on wudu ablutions, prayer, fasting, and other religious devotion. Indeed, such is the emphasis that non-Muslims are unlikely to be able to use Islamic magic. Islamic magicians believe that their magic only works with Allah's blessing, that if it wasn't Allah's wish, it could not work. Put into the context of what I've already said, this is probably related to what I said about protection from magic of deeply held religious beliefs, but could also be indicative of the magician having resolved the conflict within their own shadow. What I have observed is that magic seems to be a clash of the wills. Thus magic works when the magician's conflict is more resolved than that of the victim, but fails when it is less so. And this is a compelling reason not to send magic back, nor react, but to resolve your own shadow when you become a victim. I told you it was going to get deep, so I will pause yet again. Before continuing, I should remind you of non-dualism, from which I have strayed, but only to explain the concepts. That is that we are all one and connected. Thus, when talking about the magician and the victim, we're talking of energies within the same organism. For me, an organism and universe which includes God. I remind you of this because I'm about to make some value judgments, the very thing I've learned not to do. But forgive me, as it is to illustrate my arguments. As I've said, many black magicians engage black magic to resolve their own selves. Like us all, they are truth seekers. They believe they need to resolve the conflicts within the universe to assist it in achieving balance. Thus, when they are confronted with hypocrisy, they feel the need to confront it with their magic. Thus, in sending magic, they're helping others to resolve their conflicts and find their true selves. Remember how Islamic magic only works with Allah's will. Our black magicians also claim that in exposing these conflicts and hypocrisy, their own powers become stronger. It is here that many may be using their own powers for selfish reasons. Although again, remember, they must have resolved their own conflicts. Furthermore, many target the religiously devout and religious institutions, and it's here they feel the greatest power to be captured. The greatest hypocrisy, if you like. So have we come full circle? Well, maybe yes. After all, they're exerting their control over others. But let me emphasise, we're talking of a very small minority of magicians, and within a small minority of black magicians at that. Just like few magicians actually practice Satanism. And I need to remind you, it's exactly these thoughts which feed such energies. Maybe you feel cheated that I've taken you on an intellectual journey and not really provided you with conclusions. Well, we're always learning. And maybe that's the point, that we should be guarded for those who claim to know. For is this not the true definition of black magic?